everyone, we are science prefects here at JAGS. I'm Esme, and this is Alex.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Carlotta.
And today we are lucky enough to be hearing from an engineer.
Molly Dalton is a JAGS alumna who left in 2010 and after graduating with a master's degree in civil engineering, went on to become a successful railway engineer.
Molly is a JAGS alumna who is currently working as a project engineer at Balfour Beatty.
Over to you, Molly.
Fantastic. So thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Molly Dalton, and for those of you that have never heard my name before, which I'm assuming is everybody, I am indeed a railway engineer. Definitely not what I was planning when I first left school, as I'll tell you all about shortly. But hopefully from watching this presentation today, you will become a bit inspired by my path, and perhaps some of you will consider a similar path in the future. So you'll see there on screen a few photos. It may look familiar to some of you. London Bridge Station. It's somewhere that I worked for a few years and was responsible for quite a considerable amount of the track installation up there, which I'll tell you a bit more about, but that's a bit of an introduction to me. So how did this journey begin? Well, I live in Bromley. I've always lived in Bromley, apart from when I went to university. I did A-levels at JAGS in maths, chemistry and physics with no real plan. Like when I was in year 11, I chose those subjects. I literally chose the ones that I was good at and that I liked. I didn't think about, oh, maths and chemistry, that will make you a chemical engineer, or, oh, if I'd done biology, I could have been a doctor. Like I didn't think about the combinations at all. I just picked the subjects that I liked. And at that time, there was a bit of one born every minute fever. And I decided that I wanted to be a midwife based on that. So I applied, first of all, to do nursing at King's College London, and I was accepted to do that. And then when I got my A-level results, I had a major change of heart. I'd at that point fallen under Brian Cox's spell about physics and engineering and science. And then I was like, why am I going into more of a biology kind of field? Maybe I should be tapping into the fact that I'm actually quite good at maths, chemistry and physics. So I literally pulled out of university the week before I was meant to start, which is certainly not a plan that I would recommend for anybody. But I do feel it's important to tell that part of the story, because you can change your plans whenever and you can make it work. So as I say, I pulled out of university the week before I was supposed to go, which caused absolute mass panic with all of my sixth form people, but they supported me. I then went to do a gap year. Obviously, I needed to try and earn some money and do something productive for my CV while I decided what exact course I was going to do. So I spent more or less the whole year going around the country, looking at various universities, different programs that they offered. And I was fortunate enough that another young person who was on a year in industry placement, so Uni, eTrust, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, but feel free to give it a Google after the session. They offer year placements, which are paid for you to do between finishing school and starting university. So it was just a billing job. It was an assistant role. It wasn't a high role, obviously. It's just designed to be a year of earning some money working in a company. But I got really good insight into telecoms, which is something I knew nothing about. But then that went a bit wrong. And in the March of my year in industry, that company got taken over by somebody else, and I got overnight made redundant. So I then made a few quick calls around and found another job as a part-time pharmacy assistant in DR Harris in Piccadilly, which again, great for me building confidence, still earned lots of money, tucked it away to take to university. And I still had a few more months of work experience in my CV. So it all worked out okay in the end. So choosing civil engineering then, you heard me mention there that I went around all different universities, looked at all different courses. And these are some of the courses that I did consider. As I say, I put this on here so that you can do a bit of research if you need to after the session. I'm not going to go into what all of them are, but I do think that it's important that you don't just think that civil engineering is the only type of engineering. You can be an engineer that works in petroleum. You could be an engineer that works on tiny microchips in computers. You could be an engineer that works on space rockets. You know, the opportunities are really endless. So my degree then was civil engineering with industrial experience. That's a 4-year program where every summer in the summer holidays, rather than just not doing anything, you go on a 12-week work placement. So I did 3 12-week work placements with Balfour Beatty. through my course. They sponsored me, they gave me £1,000 a year, and they gave me a paid 12-week work placement every year. So it wasn't bad. And again, all great for my CV. So the first one was in overhead line design, so like electricity pylons, which I absolutely hated, but there you go. The second one, which I loved, was a cabling site in Lakeside, where we dug a big trench under a roundabout and put 6 massive HV cables under it. That was great. And then my third placement was in railway. So as you can see, I was fortunate that I worked for Balfour Beatty. They moved me around lots of different bits of civil engineering, gave me a flavour of all different things. And then it was that led to my choice to join Network Rail as a graduate civil engineer in 2015. After 5 or 6 months there, that didn't really work out either. I figured that I already had 3 12-week placements. I considered that I really knew what it was like to be an engineer, and I just wanted to get on with it. And I felt like the Network Rail grad scheme just wasn't quite suited to me. It was better aligned to somebody who had no work experience at all. So I got in touch with some old contacts and got a job at London Bridge. So that's where I worked for 2.5 years. I was responsible for every single rail, sleeper and ballast that you see from platform 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So more or less half of that station, I know every single sleeper by name. I was responsible for every single train that brought every sleeper, rail and ballast up there. I was responsible for all the engineers, making sure that all the levels of the track were absolutely perfect. And I think that was pretty amazing at 24, 25. But anyway, that's something I'm very proud of. If anyone's more interested in that, I'm more than happy to talk about that in questions. Then Thameslink finished, Crossrail finished. There was a bit of a lull in railway work, bit of uncertainty in terms of financing railways and things. So I thought, do you know what? I've learned loads of stuff. Let's go and do some teaching. So I went and worked as a lecturer in engineering for nearly 3 years. In that time, I carried on studying. So I did a PGCE. So I'm a qualified teacher now, as well as a qualified engineer. And I had a baby in that time as well. So yeah, that was a slightly different period of my life. But the point I'm making is that I had an engineering degree and I can use it in different areas for different jobs. So my job now then, I'm a track project engineer and I work from home, which probably sounds a bit strange. But basically, I went back to Balfour Beatty and said, I've got a daughter now. It's really hard for me to be on site all the time. What job can I do? And they said, we've got a great job for you. It's going to involve lots of work on Teams, lots of planning, lots of Excel, lots of PowerPoints, but we think you can do that from home. And I said, okay, that sounds great. So I spend roughly half of my time doing actual railway track design, and probably combined with that, I spend time tendering, so pricing for work. So me working out how many pounds it's going to cost Balfour Beatty to put that bit of track in somewhere. I spend about 20% of my time on carbon reporting. So as you may have heard in the news, there's lots of pressure about net zero and reducing carbon emissions, especially in construction. So I do a lot of work in that space. I've actually generated a massive Excel sheet that calculates how much carbon emissions there are for lots of different track work that we do. Another 20% of my time is on what we call social sustainability. So things like enhancing the local area where we operate. So do things like go into special needs schools and revamp their playgrounds, all sorts of works like that. In fact, arguably what I'm doing today also falls under that. So coming and talking to young people about careers in engineering. I also am heavily involved in diversity and inclusion. So my path in engineering has not been perhaps as, how can I put this, ordinary as others. And I think some of those things relate to the fact that, one, I'm a woman, and two, because no one in my family is an engineer. So I do a lot to try and make people believe that they can also be an engineer, regardless of those barriers that they're facing, maybe their education, maybe their work experience, etc. So, and then the rest of my time is spent helping new grads and apprentices that come in and trying to teach them some of the stuff that's in my mind. So to give you a bit of a flavour then, so track design, you all get on the railway all the time. You don't think about how smooth it is, how bumpy it is, whether the train's safe, but behind the scenes, there's this whole myriad of things going on. So this is just an example. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that's showing you the track from above. So I've just recently designed a curve through Clapham Junction, platforms 10 and 11. So if you ever go down there anytime soon, we've got a bit of a problem because the drivers have reported that when the trains are coming through the platforms, they're far too close. They feel far too close. So we've got to do some work to move the two tracks away from each other without hitting the platforms, because that's also not ideal. And then here you can see a bit of a cross-section profile. Again, this is all done in CAD, special CAD program for railways, but hopefully if some of you are doing like DT, that kind of thing, you're seeing, oh, this is what that relates to. So here you can see details of along the track, what level we're going to put in, what slope we're going to put in, and all of that stuff. So pretty interesting if you're interested in CAD. This is the output that comes from my carbon reporting works. I won't bore you with the details just now, but the main thing to point out is that I add up all the sleepers, all the ballast, and all the rail, and how much carbon emissions go into just producing that. And then as a secondary component, we work out how much transportation. So for example, some of our sleepers come from Japan. So I have to add in how much carbon emissions it is to get them over on a ship, get them over on a plane, all that kind of thing. So social sustainability. So as you can see here, some stuff we did recently at a school in Orpington. So a proportion of the money that we generate as a business, we try and spend in going out into schools and doing works like this. So fortunately here, Network Rail Green Funding supported us. So we said, look, we're going to go out into a school, do this work. They gave us a sum of money and said, go and do some painting, go and put some plant pots in. And we did that as a great team building day. We partnered here with Youth Power, who are a local youth empowerment organisation, working with young people who come from difficult home circumstances as well, and try to give them a bit of inspiration about engineering, when we all had a really good day, apart from the rain. My D&I role then, so I am a senior leader in Balfour Beatty Rail. I'm one of 3 people who leads the whole D&I initiative for the organisation. I'm up there with 40, 50-year-old people, so I'm doing quite well. But more than that, I'm hoping that I'm bringing some young ideas and inspiration to that role as well. An initiative that I recently brought in is automatic interviews for underrepresented groups. So as of this coming academic year, when people apply for grad roles and apprenticeships, if you come from any underrepresented groups, and that includes females, you'll get a guaranteed interview with Balfour Beatty. And that's something that we haven't ever had before. Things like making sure that our fonts are in Arial, because that's suitable for people who have neurodiversity. I also chair the Women in Engineering Forum and Parents of Disabled Children forums, as we identified that those people in Balfour Beatty are some of the most likely to find it difficult in the workplace because of their home circumstances. And I'm leading all the celebrations this year for International Day of Disabilities for Balfour Beatty as well. I'm telling you all of this because I just think it's quite important that not only do you see the link between me doing my degree and me working as an engineer, but also see what the day-to-day life of an engineer is actually like in a big company like Balfour Beatty. So here you can see some of the work that we do with our new grads and apprentices. So in track design, obviously you can imagine it's a bit of a rite of passage in that you start off doing some of the easier tasks, and then as you get more experienced, you move on. So this is just an example of what a typical graduate or apprentice might start on. So this is a program called ClearRoute on the left. So what we do is we tell ClearRoute exactly what trains normally come down that track and what the track geometry is like, so what the shape of the track is. And then if we have any, can you see my mouse? Yes. So if we have it, so here we've got like a little platform canopy. So we can program those in as well. And then we can simulate the trains moving at line speed and check whether they're going to hit. So here, one of our biggest trains only had a 70mm gap to the canopy, which is quite close. So that's just an example of what, as a graduate design engineer, the sort of work you might get involved in. And then that's more of in a design role. But if you are more in a site role, the picture on the right, so that's me going out with one of our apprentices and showing him a bit about how we install a road rail access point, which is a bit like a level crossing, but it's so that we can get machines on the railway. So like, you know, like JCB, like digger things. So there you can see it's quite varied for your graduate life if you were to do a civil engineering degree. Has anybody got any questions? I've somehow managed to finish precisely on the minute on time, which is great. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast, but I welcome any questions that anybody's got about my life as a civil engineer.
Great, thank you so much. So Alex and I have prepared some questions, but we'd absolutely love if schools who've joined could put their questions in the chat as well.
Brilliant.
So one of the questions that we just wanted to ask was, obviously you said you kind of looked through a multitude of different careers, nursing and things. So do you have any advice for people who, you know, maybe they're sat in year 11 or 12 or 10 and they're just really not sure what they want to do, and maybe they have a subject or two that they really like, Is there any advice that you'd give them for that moment?
So I think that there's a couple of things to think about. The first, and I think this is something that's not often talked about at a young enough age, is that it's one thing choosing your course. And what I mean by that is choosing that you want to do civil engineering, or you want to do mechanical, or you want to be a doctor, or whatever your program's going to be. But it's another thing is that actually every university doesn't teach that course in the same way. So as soon as you possibly can, and there's no age limit, like you can go to open days whenever you want. Anybody can go. It doesn't matter if you're in year 9 or year 8 or what year you're in. There's nothing stopping you going out to university open days. You all live in London, I'm assuming, most people on this call. So you've got universities everywhere. Just keep engaged with their websites. Some of them offer like summer schools and things, taster days for your age group. So really try and, if there's an area you're interested in, start doing your research as soon as you can. But when it comes to actually picking your courses at the universities, so if I give you an example, Birmingham, our engineering program was very practical. So there's a lot of group projects. You were assessed a lot on group presentations, teamwork, and all of that. If you go to another university, you might find that it's much more academic exams. So if you're really like an exam-based person, then pick a university that's going to assess you with lots of exams. Equally, if you go to somewhere like Coventry, I think last time I checked, it was 80% was on coursework, 20% on exams across the whole program. So there's a real difference. And I think a lot of people, they get to the end of their A levels, they're like, oh, all the exams were so stressful, I don't want any more of that. And you don't realize that you can go to a university where they're going to assess you just on coursework. So I think that's something that you really need to look at as well as the programs.
Okay, so what did you want to be when you were younger?
Well, I mean, I've covered most of that, but when I left school, I really did think I was going to be a midwife. As I say, one born every minute fever had kicked in, and I thought that was my calling in life. But I thought it was a wise idea to do nursing because obviously as a nurse, you can have that qualification across children's, adults and everything. And then if you want to specialise in midwifery, you can do that later. But I'll be honest, that decision was made probably about 6 weeks before my UCAS form went in year 13. And all through year 12, all through year 11, I didn't have a clue what I was going to be. I've always had an interest in engineering, but as I say, that I don't think that was particularly, I didn't have anybody that I knew who was an engineer. I didn't know what it was to be an engineer. So I was interested in the engineering stuff. Like I was good at maths. I liked DT. I liked helping my dad fix things. I was straight in there if there was an IKEA thing to get put together. You know, like I had that mindset and I had those skills developing, but it wasn't till my gap year that I went, oh, okay, I'm going to be an engineer now. I was still in my gap year going, I've got maths, chemistry and physics. What can I do with that?
So I'm kind of combine two of the questions.
That's all right.
So we've got a question about what inspired you and interested you in engineering, and from when did you start and begin having an interest in engineering?
Honestly, I think I've always had it. I just didn't think I knew what engineering was. And I know that's going to sound like a really funny response, but I was that kid who liked Lego, who enjoyed DT, and I watched all the documentaries. Like I was interested in it. I just didn't really know enough to go, oh, I can now be an engineer. So in the beginning, as I say, I was more thinking along the medicine, midwifery, nursing, that sort of route. Then when I realized actually it was the physical sciences that did interest me more, I obviously started then looking around at programs, but actually I think that interest was there. Like that was there since I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I just didn't have anybody at home saying, oh, when you grow up, Molly, you should be an engineer. And I just don't think I really understood what it was like to be an engineer when I was younger.
If you were to plan the gap year you did, what would you have done differently to get experience as an engineer?
Honestly, absolutely nothing. Because it was having those 2 jobs that I had that gave me weekends off, that gave me time to go around all the universities and actually think about what I was going to do, which was time that, to be honest, I didn't really have when I was doing my A levels. That was very, very busy. I wouldn't change it at all, because if I'd have took a more engineering based role, like a more planned one for my gap year, I don't think I'd have had as much time to go around looking at all the universities. So I'm still glad my gap year turned out as it did. However, obviously, I'm a great advocate for, like, if you get offered a year in Balfour Beatty, in Network Rail, in Shell, BP, whoever, a lot of these companies offer year placements. then for sure go and do it. They're fantastic.
Thank you. So obviously your job's quite mathematical. So we just wondered, did you always enjoy maths when you're at JAGS, or was it something that you kind of started to really
Oh
enjoy?
yeah. So I always enjoyed maths. But I do want to make it clear that maths is not like the most important. If you don't get like an A star in maths, you can't be an engineer. Like, it's certainly not like that. I mean, to give you an example, we have a lot of apprentices who maybe got a C in their maths, so not the highest grade, but were still obviously quite good at maths. And some of those people then come on our level 3, level 4 apprenticeship programs, and they still at the end of it end up being an engineer. But there may be a bit more problem solving, site based, maybe more like that, where obviously a lot of my day job is still involves maths, calculations, all of that. But I've chosen that. I could have also been an engineer that didn't have a lot of maths. So yes, I've always been interested, but I don't think it's like you have to be a maths whiz to be an engineer, because that's definitely not true.
Great, thank you. And so slightly different to the one I asked earlier about not being sure what to do. What if you're sort of sure that you want to do some sort of engineering? What kind of GCSEs or A levels do you think roughly you should be kind of looking at or taking to be able to work in engineering? Or perhaps none at all?
So if you're definitely sure, there's two questions there. So if you're definitely sure you want to do engineering at university, then you need to definitely be looking at maths, ideally be looking at physics as well. But more important than any of that is just a combination of subjects that support. So most universities ask for 2 sciences at A level. So that can be maths and physics, but it can equally be maths and chemistry. For example, if you were going to do chemical engineering. More recently, some universities have started asking for further maths, a lot still are not. So there's options there. Equally, if you left school at 16 and you wanted to be an engineer, you could go on to an apprenticeship and never do an A level in maths at all. Now, I'm not sure the mix of people that I'm talking to here in terms of whether you definitely want to do A levels or definitely want to do something else, but I would hate for people to leave this presentation thinking that the only way to be an engineer is to get an A level in maths, because that's certainly not the case.
Why did you choose to specifically do civil engineering?
Mainly because I looked at, as I say, in my gap year, I went to a lot of universities and I made a point of going to all the engineering bits. Like, I didn't just go to civil each time. But the more I spoke to people, I thought, oh, okay, I am interested in that. As I say, at the time, I thought I'd end up more in like buildings and structures, but it so turned out that I've ended up more in transport.
And about picking, thank you first of all, about picking what branch of engineering, because obviously engineering is a really broad like subject. How did you pick civil over, say, mechanical or other types of engineering?
So that is a really fantastic question. I was very interested in buildings, in everything to do with civil. So for me, that was like, I didn't want to do chemical engineering enough. You know, for me, it was quite an obvious choice. What's fantastic, and will be more the case, I think, by the time that the people on this call go to university, is most universities now are having a common general engineering first year. So your first year of even if you apply for civil engineering on UCAS, your first year of university will be like one module in mechanical, one module in civil, one module in material science, one module in electronic. And then at the end of that first year, you choose which one you definitely want to do. So I know Birmingham started doing that. Cambridge has done that for years anyway. You know, there's lots of different universities that offer it like that. In terms of picking a program, though, for the point of applying for UCAS, the only way you can know is to just go and research it all. I can't put it any other way. Like, don't just look at the title of the university program, so chemical engineering, but look at what they're going to teach you within that. So do lots and lots of research. Go and talk to people at these universities doing the programs. Let them tell you that, oh, there's so many exams here, or there's lots of coursework here, or, oh, we do a lot of maths here, because it really does vary from one university to another.
What skills do you need for engineering?
What skills do you need for engineering? Wow, that's a big question. You need to be resourceful. You need to make good contacts. If you fall out with anybody, you need to make friends with them again, because you might fall out on site. Sometimes that happens, but you might need that person again next week. You need to be pay attention to detail and be proud of your work. because ultimately you're the engineer, you're signing it off, you're responsible for it. And I think also asking when you're out of your depth. So there'll be times as an engineer where someone will ask you to do something you've never done before. And of course you should still do it, but you just need to make sure you've got the right support in place.
Great, thank you. I think we have a couple more questions about some apprenticeships. Someone's asking, do you have an apprentice or do you work with apprentices?
So at the moment I work very closely with 2 apprentices, and I work less closely with about 6 apprentices. So for example, yesterday, so as you can imagine, this time of year, so all our graduates and apprentices started in September. So I gave them 4 weeks to settle in, and then all the apprentices for the civil engineering team, not just the railway engineering team where I work, I invited them all for like a safety conversation yesterday. So a bit of training that I did for them. So yes, I work very closely with all the grads and apprentices, and I try and make sure they know who I am.
Okay, this question is actually from one of the maths teachers at JAGS, Miss Plant,
Lovely.
and she asks,
Miss Plant's watching. Oh goodness.
She asks, what's a day in the life as an engineer look like for you?
So very varied. So I mean, to give you a bit of an example of some of the stuff that's happened today alone. So spent some time talking to our apprentices this morning because they were going into college, and they've got a health and safety assignment that they're all very worried about. Then went into a meeting about a promotion that I'm moving into next month. So I'll be in charge of all the track works for the Northumberland line, which is a new project that's happening in the north of the country. So I had basically an interview and an assessment on me for that. I've had a meeting with somebody else about basically some design work that's upcoming on Core Valley lines. And I've also done a little bit of work on HS2 as well. And that's literally all before 11:45.
Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. How hard is it being an engineer?
Oh, super hard. Oh yeah, it's really hard. But it's hard in a good way. It's hard in a like trying to juggle your time on lots of different things and make sure you get your deadlines to at the right times and working with loads of different people. So like, even if I just give you a very quick example of today, I've worked with apprentices this morning. I've worked on a price for something for HS2. I've worked on something to do with a wheel lathe in Holyhead, Core Valley lines. Don't know if any of you have heard about that, but there's a massive program to bring a new railway through the Welsh valleys, which again, a whole different world worth of complexities and things to think about on that. And that's just been this morning, just before I spoke to you lot. So like, every day is full of different things and trying to juggle your time and deliver good outputs all the time as well. So yes, it's hard, but it's also fantastic.
What are you most looking forward to in your job, or what do you most look forward to in your job?
I really enjoy my time with the apprentices and graduates. That's really like, of course, I enjoy the technical side. I enjoy trying to work things out, trying to install something that no one's installed for 20 years. Nobody I can talk to locally knows about. Like, I enjoy all the problem solving, but I do also really enjoy working with young people as well. So I get to do both.
Amazing, thank you. So obviously you've talked about some of the adversities that underrepresented groups can face when going into a job in engineering. So did you ever really feel like perhaps this isn't the career for me, or that you felt like you should give up? And if so, what were the things that really motivated you to keep going if there was adversity there?
No, I mean, I think there's definitely been different times in my life where I've felt more comfortable at work than others. I'd never say like, you know, when I chose to go into teaching, that wasn't because I didn't want to be an engineer anymore, like I wanted to leave. It certainly wasn't that. It was just more, I'd done so much outreach working with young people, and I really enjoyed like the idea of being a teacher, and that's why I went to do it. And the reason I've come back into engineering is because I missed the buzz of that. Do you know what I mean? I missed the things being so complicated and trying to work them out and solving problems. I missed that challenge. I almost wish maybe I should do part-time of both. That maybe would be good. But yeah, adversity wise, it's only really been, and I mean, this is quite a bold thing to say considering I've been at work for 7 years, it's only really been the last 6 months that I've not felt alone as a female engineer. So it's only been in the last 6 months when I've built up this forum. I'm talking, because obviously most females in engineering, like, we're all working in different places, so we don't all see each other a lot. And this was a way of us all coming together to say we're not the only ones. So I definitely think that is a bit of a problem, you know, especially as you can all imagine. I spent 7 years at an all-girls school where everywhere I looked there was girls, and then I suddenly landed in a workplace where everywhere I looked there were men. So it was just a bit different. I wouldn't say it's been bad. There's been a lot of men and women who've supported me along the way, but I look forward to your generation of engineers because I think there'll be much better representation by the time you come into the workplace.
First of all, what is your favourite part about being an engineer?
Oh, it's always busy. So for me, I like the fact that one day I might be involved in a bit of design, one day I might be trying to price some works, one day I might be up at Canary Wharf in a meeting about HS2. Like every day there's something different going on. So yes, sometimes there's a lot of maths, but there's also dealing with people, dealing with graduates. So there's a lot to the role. And that's what I enjoy, really.
Thank you so much. What is about going more into your job? What is your favorite thing or most interesting thing that you've done on your job or just in your day-to-day life?
Oh, definitely Thameslink. Thameslink wins by like a million miles. To be responsible for literally Network Rail saying to you, you've got the weekend, we're going to let you rip out 200 meters worth of track, and on Monday morning we really want trains to run back down there again. There is nothing like it. Honestly, there's nothing like it. So yeah, I'd definitely say that's been my most positive experience.
Okay, what's the hardest problem you've ever faced as an engineer?
Not being able to give the track back to Network Rail Monday morning. So we had a situation on the Cannon Street lines where everything went wrong. We had a machine breakdown, we had materials not on the right train, we had all sorts wrong. And basically, I turned up onto site at about 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, at which point I'm expecting to be looking at all the tracks back in now, and we're just making it look tidy. And instead there was a hole in the ground, a 400-meter long hole in the ground. So we had to very quickly, obviously, push our program forward. But basically, I ended up out there till 9 o'clock Sunday morning, something like that. And that was eventually when we handed back, when we should have handed back about 9 p.m. on Sunday. So I had a lot of meetings and a big telling off about that, none of which was really my fault. But yeah, that was definitely one of the lowlights.
Do you travel a lot as an engineer?
I used to. I mean, I'll give an answer for that represents engineering, because obviously as a civil engineer, you're likely to have to travel. Like your driving license is important, especially if you're a site engineer. If you imagine, especially on the railway, 1 minute I could be installing at London Bridge, the next minute I could be installing down at Lewisham. So like you need to be mobile. On a job like Core Valley lines, 1 minute you're in Cardiff, next minute you're in the middle of the Welsh Valleys. So again, like if you're on site, then you've got to be based where the work is. If you're office based, I mean, we have engineers that work at Canary Wharf and have done for 30 years of their life, never been on site ever. So it's quite variable.
In your job, how much do you work individually as opposed to in a team?
That's a good question. So that's been very variable through my career. Right now, I would say 60 to 70% of my time is on my own, and maybe 30 to 40% is with other people. But in my old job role at Thameslink, it was probably completely the other way around. It was probably more like 70, 80% working with people all the time, and 20% writing it up and quickly getting it done on my own.
Nice. So what's the most surprising thing you discovered about being an engineer in all the time you've been one?
Surprising thing. I'm going to give you a very honest answer for this. I'm still surprised that people are surprised that I'm a female engineer. And what I mean by that is when I go to introduce myself to people, or when I sit in a meeting and I say, "Oh, I'm Molly, I'm an engineer," and they go like that. Still get that look sometimes, which I think is quite amazing considering there's people like Roma Agrawal in the media all the time. People know who she is and she's a female engineer. I still find it funny that people expect you to be somebody different. They expect you to be a project manager, or they expect you to be admin or something else. They don't expect that you're actually the engineer. And that's happened a few times. Like even one time I turned up on a construction site in orange clothes and got asked if I was in the wrong place. pretty sure I'm not in the wrong place. Wearing orange clothes and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, there's still a little bit of adversity there sometimes, but you have to push through.
Obviously, you've been working for about 7 years.
Yep.
Do you have any goals for the future for you or for the direction of the company that you're working at? Or
I have one big goal, and that's to make us 50-50, men and women. I think that's a way off, but I'm working on it. Career-wise, so funnily enough, just this morning, I've had a conversation about a promotion to a track CRE. So that's like in charge, like your most responsible engineer for track for that team of engineers. And that's going to be on the Northumberland project. So that's another big new set of track in the north of the country. So yeah, ultimately, obviously, I want to keep climbing the ladder, as it were, in the engineering world. But alongside that, I also want to make sure that the pathway for young females into engineering especially is more accessible than it was when I was younger.
So what projects do you hope to work on in the future?
I'd love to get on some high speed at some point. Whether that ends up being HS2 or whether I go abroad, not sure yet. But yeah, I'd love to get involved in some high speed stuff because that's about the only thing I've not done yet, which is pretty amazing for 31.
What advice would you give to a girl who wants to do engineering?
Do it. But not just do it and make sure you know all about it. So go on YouTube, watch videos, get inspired by somebody, go to, like, as soon as you possibly can, like Women in Science and Engineering, type WISE into Google. They do summer schools, they do all sorts of things you can do right from year 9. They have competitions, engage with them, and really do your research, because what I've found through my career is a lot of females especially, they start off in engineering and then something pulls them away. And I think a lot of the time that's because they haven't been told as much about it as they should have been. So my advice to females and males, but especially females, is always do as much reading and research as you can, so that when you pick the engineering that you want to do, you're on the right track. Like, what I would hate is like someone gets really inspired by this, goes and applies for like aerospace, and then goes, whoa, that's way too much maths for me. And then they lose engineering altogether. When if they'd have just done materials engineering, they might have been happier because there's more chemistry there. Do you see what I mean? So like, I would really encourage any females who are even slightly interested in engineering to just make sure they do their research.
Great, thank you. I think we're coming to an end, but I'll just ask one more question. So if you're talking to quite a lot of young people here who might not be sure what to do, is there one piece of advice that you'd give to people about their career or choosing their career, or perhaps people who are interested in engineering?
Honestly, I think at the younger ages, so I think if you're like year 7, year 8, is just start being interested. YouTube is your friend. Yeah. If you go into YouTube and put Engineering Steve, you can see Engineering Steve from Network Rail walk around railway sites across the whole country doing videos about all the cool stuff they're doing. Go and show an interest, watch stuff, read stuff, immerse yourself in it, and the path will become very, very apparent to you.
Perfect. So we only have a few minutes left. So finally, what's one piece of advice you would give to people who want to become engineers in general, both female and male?
Go for it. And don't let don't let your own preconceptions make you think you can't do it. I've met engineers who started off digging holes on the railway. I've met engineers who did an apprenticeship, so they finished school at 16 and then went into level 3 training that way. I've met people who've got PhDs and they're engineers. So what I would say is, don't think you have to follow my path to be an engineer. Don't think you need maths, chemistry and physics at A level, because you definitely don't.
Well, thank you so much for such an insightful and inspiring talk.
So yeah, thank you so much, Molly. It's been so insightful, inspiring.
Yeah, that's all right, no problem. Thank you.